All right, Grant, we are here talking about your article, Understanding Retirement Income. And we see clients of all wealth levels worried about this topic. When they shift from accumulating wealth to now being on the verge of having to start withdrawing from their savings, their retirement nest egg, there's concerns about what about a market crash? What if I overspend? Logistics of even what account do I draw things from? So I thought it would be valuable to take a minute and talk a little bit about this. So maybe we can start with what it seems like people most commonly get wrong about retirement income planning.
Well, yeah, Josh, this is obviously a pretty big topic that we'll just cover a couple highlights in a few moments here. But one of the things that we see people get wrong a lot is a couple of common things. One is they've built up and they've been targeting this number. They've been climbing this mountain. They want to get to the peak. They're like, once I have this number, I'm good. And then they forget, well, wait, how am I going to get down the mountain? I've been building wealth. How do I create income from it? And they come to the stark reality of like, this is a whole different ball game to take money out of a portfolio strategically than it is building one strategically. So that's one we see a lot. And then the other one we see is underestimating the impacts of either some underestimating the impacts for inflation, as well as the effects that volatility will have on their assets as they're taking money out of them. Because oftentimes when people are young and they're building, they're doing their careers, they just shove money in their 401ks and their portfolios and maybe their real estate. And they don't really worry about the price fluctuations that much because they don't have to. But when you're taking money out, that becomes to be a really significant variable to be taken account of.
Yeah, and it's we also find it's almost like a change in nature. Like people on the way up, they're exercising responsibility by putting money away, and then it
Mhm.
feels irresponsible to take money out of what I've saved. So it can be hard also for people just to get used to the idea of spending. So all the more reason to really focus in on a stable retirement income plan. So let's actually we'll use the article that you wrote on this to talk through a couple of things. If you're finding this video from the article, you've already seen the article. If you're finding this video directly, the link to the article will be in the description of the video, so you can check it out. But this is from our Insights blog, where we have lots of insights on from our team on all things financial, whether it's strategies to help optimize what you have, or even ways to think about living an enjoyable lifestyle, and the ways to use your wealth. But we're going to focus in on your article here, Understanding Retirement Income. And I want to zoom into your three steps that you lay out here for building a retirement paycheck. You talk up here about why to have a retirement paycheck. What we want to be doing is creating the same experience for somebody that you had while you were working. You have just a paycheck coming in. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about taking withdrawals all the time. You want a systematic, automated process, and that's something we can help with. But you walk through three steps here to set a budget, take stock of your fixed income sources, and then essentially position your portfolio to fill the gap. So when you think about these three steps, where do we tend to see the most risk, and where do these plans go wrong?
Yeah, a couple places you see risk and things going wrong. Number one is on setting a budget. For some people, that's just a kind of almost a four-letter word. They don't want to think about setting a budget. They're like, Grant, we've never had a budget. We're going to start now. We're 50 plus years old. We're going to start now. I'd say one of the biggest misnomers is life doesn't change that much when you retire in terms of often the spending. So one of the things we see as a risk is there's a lot of literature out there that say, hey, when you retire, you'll need about 70% or 80% of your income that you needed before, because things will shift and change in your daily commute and other things like that. While that may be valid for some, in our experience, we typically see that the very next month after you retired, you spend the same amount of money. So that's number one, is the risk of not getting the budget right and thinking everything's going to change. Yes, life is going to change in your daily routines, but the spending doesn't typically go down. And that's often quoted a lot in financial planning literature. Number two is on when you're kind of thinking about building out the strategy is Fixed income sources don't always keep up with inflation. So that's a risk and a miss sometimes that we see. And then on the portfolio front is figuring out how do we turn that portfolio into an income stream that's reliable and that you won't outlive. And that's where I mentioned before, underestimating volatility is a big risk, and not having a solid strategy to do that on a sustainable basis month to month can create some pretty different outcomes over the course of a retirement.
Yeah, one of the things that we'll oftentimes talk about as well, especially when it comes to the portfolio aspect of things, is trying to. So let's just say it can be very nerve-wracking, first of all, to start withdrawing from what you've worked so hard to save. So one of our first focuses is to help build a stable, predictable income stream out of your portfolio. But one of the critical aspects that we'll talk about regularly is what happens when the market crashes or when there's a significant downturn or something like that. It's pretty reasonable to expect that throughout somebody's retired life, they're going to see multiple significant market declines. So it's really, really important to not just build a strategy, but to play forward the movie of when the market declines dramatically, what are we going to do? Because in addition to, I mean, so you, up here, you talk about the risk of overspending. That's something that no amount of planning can correct for. If the projections and estimated income that you've planned for is undershot by a significant amount, all the projections are wrong. It's the same thing, behaviorally speaking, when you build a strategy, but then you build a portfolio strategy, and then the market declines, and you go, "Oh my gosh, the sky's falling. I need to go to cash. I need to abandon my strategies." Again, no amount of planning can stop the market from doing its thing. We can certainly position you for less risk, but what we want to do is say, when this type of event happens, how are we going to respond to it? How will we know if we need to make a change? I can't overestimate or overemphasize that enough.
Mhm.
So a couple of ways that we see these go wrong. So you shift now to talking about two common approaches to portfolio income, the golden goose and the buckets approach. Maybe just in brief here, give me your like one breath description of the golden goose versus the buckets approach.
Yeah, so the golden goose comes from the famed Aesop's fable about the farmer who got the golden eggs from the goose. Most likely, you've heard that story at some point in your life of where the goose keeps giving out a golden egg every day. Farmer gets greedy, cuts into the goose to try to get all the eggs at once, and finds that there's nothing there. So, the idea and how this relates to a portfolio strategy and a breath is thinking about the golden egg that comes off every month or every quarter, and that's in the way of interest and dividends. So, interest from bonds or other debt obligations that you own, and dividends from companies that you own that are paying out. And the idea there is living off of those cash flow payments that come out over time. When you think about transferring that over to the buckets also applies here. It can be a different way of looking at your money, but think about dividing your money out into three buckets. So on the left, you'll see safety. This is where we want to keep a good cash reserve or emergency reserve at an appropriate level to protect from unexpected expenses or things like that, or market events, and then positioning a solid 5 to 7 years of income needed for you in your retirement in the income bucket. And this is invested in a strategic way to create paychecks to you every month. And then in the growth bucket is your 7+ year money. And this would be the more growth oriented assets to help you pace or exceed inflation over time to build capital for later. And you just gradually distribute these buckets over time to create a sustainable income strategy that, back to what Josh, what you were saying a minute ago, helps you navigate those down market cycles that we know are going to come, because we've planned for them in these various buckets. And so we can ride those out because we have a plan that aligns with your time horizon.
Yeah, and so down here in the article, you give that guidance as well. How should somebody choose which approach they're going to use? Who can use the golden goose? Who should use the buckets? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, the answer is that it depends. Both of these
It's always the annoying answer from advisors like us, by the way.
it is, and doctors, but
Yes. Yeah, right. Yeah.
the thing that's they both apply. They're good philosophies that apply. But I would say if you're someone who has a sizable wealth or don't has a lot of needs, the golden goose is a great example to think about. That's a very easy plan. You know, you have XYZ dollars. You know, you can just take off the interest and dividends, and if that keeps you happy, that's a very simple plan and will ride out a lot of markets, assuming the portfolio is structured right to create said dividends and interest. In the bucket approach also can apply to that person as well. But let's
Yep.
shift over to someone who is in a situation like I don't want to leave a big goose to someone at the end of the road. Or maybe I have scarcer resources for my income generating, then they definitely want to look at something like this because this will allow someone to spend down wisely. And
Yep.
what I mean by wisely is still navigate up and down markets, still optimize their wealth, but ensure that they're doing it smartly through time horizons over time and allow them to actually spend down their assets. Not that they have to, but this strategy would be something that they could keep a lot of clarity on their spend down. So
Yep.
I would definitely push to someone that direction for that.
Yeah, one of the ways you could think about this is if you go through a planning process, and again, hopefully, one of the things we emphasize here is in order to figure out which strategy you should use, you need to go through a planning process to figure out how much do you have, how much do you need, and are you ready to create that income stream? If you find you have enough to just live off of the interest and dividends, you might prefer the golden goose approach, you might prefer the bucket approach. You can kind of choose. But Grant, you hit on something really important. If you're the person who has not accumulated enough or is kind of right on that line and is likely to have to spend through some of the principal, the bucket approach is really going to be a good way to focus for you again because you don't need all of the income you're going to need for the rest of your retired life. So as long as you understand how much needs to go in safety, income, and growth, and then you have played out the what will we do when the market declines, the bucket approach can be a really successful approach for you. And then you kind of wrap the article here with landing the plane. And a couple things that I like here are talking about the fact that it's not just when you're within a year of retirement, but this should probably start somewhere like 5 years. Oftentimes we'll hear 3 to 5 years away from retirement is a good time to start logistically game planning what this is going to look like. Um, and this is oftentimes one of the times when folks will come to us. They go, "Hey, I'm really thinking about actually putting the game plans together." So if you find yourself in that, I'm within 5 years or so of retirement, don't think, "Oh, I'll address this later." It's a perfect time to start thinking through what I ought to do to be best prepared for this next phase of life. And then we also know there's more things than just the finances to think about. What am I going to do with my time? What am I going to do with any leftover funds that I have? How do I transfer that to my family or to causes that I care about? All things that you can find resources for on our Insights blog. You're also welcome to reach out to us for a conversation about how approaches like this might fit into your situation. But for now, we hope this was helpful. Grant, thanks for the insights, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.